South Korea is the most expensive place in the world to raise a child in relative terms, according to a new study, where the cost of child rearing is over 7 times the GDP per capita.
한국이 전 세계에서 상대적으로 양육비가 가장 많이 드는 나라로 1인당 국내 총생산 GDP의 7배가 넘는 금액이 든다는 연구 결과가 나왔습니다. Oh, so in a way, I guess it's not surprising because people know it's expensive to raise a child here, but the most expensive in the world.
Yeah, who knew that it was the most
Right.
expensive in the world?
Yeah.
But it is in relative terms,
Okay,
right?
so tell us more, yeah.
In relative terms. So if something is in relative terms or relatively, it's in comparison
Right.
to. So you have to compare it to something. And when you say terms, they're either numbers or some sort of information that's involved there. So you can use that, for example, in Hawaii. It's cold in the winter, relatively, or in relative terms, right? So compared to, I guess, the summer in Hawaii, it would be cold in winter. But of course, compared to somewhere like Korea, it wouldn't be as cold.
Absolutely, or Canada.
Exactly. Although Korea is very cold these days, too.
Yeah, absolutely. 네, 상대적으로 뭐뭐 할 때 relatively speaking이라고 우리가 일상 대화에서 많이 쓰죠. 여기 뉴스에서는 조금 더 뉴시한 표현으로 in relative terms, 상대적으로 말했을 때라는 얘기인데요. 그러니까 GDP 대비 양육비가 가장 높은 나라가 한국이라면서요.
Specifically, when we say in relative terms, we're talking about data or numbers a lot of times.
Yeah.
And you're right, Korea is the most expensive. The way they calculated this was about 335 million won in total to raise a child up until the age of 18.
3억 3,500만 원 정도가 든다. 이런 얘기인데요. GDP 대비 헤드라인에도 나와 있죠. 7배가 넘는 돈이 들어간다.
Right. And that's how they calculated this.
Right.
They calculated the total amount to raise a child or rear a child till 18 compared to or in relative terms to the country's per capita GDP.
So looking at this list, I can see the top 5 are South Korea, China, Italy, the UK, and New Zealand. And then I was also curious to know, what about the relatively, I wouldn't say cheaper, but more affordable
right?
countries?
Singapore is one.
Yeah.
Australia and France are among the least expensive countries in
그렇군요.
terms of income. Yes.
네. 그러니까 양육비가 가장 덜 드는 나라로는 이제 싱가포르, 호주, 프랑스 등이 있고요. 가장 이제 GDP 대비 양육비가 많이 드는 나라는 한국, 중국, 이탈리아, 영국, 뉴질랜드 순입니다.
And, we're talking about in relative terms, we're talking
of
about. So
course.
335 million won, that alone, you don't know, is that a lot or is it little? But in absolute terms, it could be less than the United States, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
It might cost 500 million won in the US, but relative to GDP, we're talking.
Exactly. 절대적인 금액, the absolute amount를 보는 게 아니고요. In relative terms, 상대적으로 GDP 대비 양육비가 얼마나 드느냐를 보는 겁니다. 그래서 아까 이제 한국 같은 경우에는 7배 이상이라고 했죠. 구체적으로는 7.79배더라고요. 그런데 싱가포르랑 좀 비교해 보면은 싱가포르는 GDP 대비 2.1배의 양육비가 든다고 합니다. 이렇게 자녀를 양육하는 거 아까도 언급하셨는데 child raising 할 수도 있지만 child rearing.
Rearing.
Yeah.
So R-E-A-R. Like it says, it means to raise or to breed, bring to maturity. And we can rear children, you can rear plants, you can rear animals, of course, right? So, or it means to, set up straight. To erect is also rearing, but here we're using it in terms of raising something.
rearing, R-E-A-R 이렇게 쓰고요. 자녀를 양육한다, 키운다라는 뜻으로 쓰는 표현입니다. Here's the headline again. South Korea is the most expensive place in the world to raise a child in relative terms, according to a new study, where the cost of child rearing is over 7 times the GDP per capita. Moving on, this is our second headline.